It's the little things that make the difference. Oh, that's hot. Lovely to see you all here again today. And what are we looking at? Well, I thought we'd look at keyframes because we just assume that everybody knows how to use a keyframe, the different ways of using a keyframe, and what a keyframe is. And we shouldn't really, we should explain it all. So it's a sort of back to basics video today on editing to just lay out what a keyframe actually does. And to be fair, it is the little things that make your editing that little bit extra. It gives it that little bit extra to be a good edit or an interesting edit or have an interesting effect to it. That just makes it what it is. And keyframes are very much part of that. It's the little things that make the difference. So let's have a look and see what all the keyframes are, what we do with them, how we do that, and the sort of things that we can do in a very quick tutorial in Premiere Pro. Let's get to it. So now that we're in Premiere Pro, we've got this graphic here, which is effectively what we're going to use to illustrate how a keyframe actually works and what you do in order to tell it to move from state A to state B. So first off, what we're going to do is select it. So it's selected in our timeline. It's a 10-second long graphic, which means it's only going to last 10 seconds, but we're not going to use all of that. Then we're going to go up to the effects controls and we're going to make sure we're selected on that. And you get two options with the FX controls. You've got the initial items, which allow you to change the state, so position, scale, rotation, opacity, etc., with all the corresponding figures to where those things are. So the scale's at 100% and so on. If we then sort of change that, it changes it down in size. So that allows us to change things directly in a minute way. And then you've also got the keyframe window, which allows you to see what is actually happening with your keyframes in a graphical way. So for us, we want to move this white square across from one side to another, and we want it to take 2 seconds to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the position system here, so the options for position. We're going to click on the first stopwatch, and that's initially put in a keyframe for us. So there's the keyframe in the graphics right on the very edge of this timeline, and then that's showing us that this item is actually over this keyframe, and this is the positions that it's in. Now what we can do then is we can shift across to 2 seconds. So if we just move to 2 seconds, what I'll do is I'll just make that exactly 2 seconds, and then what we can then do is we can shift our item across. So we'll move it across to where we want to move it to. So here we go, we've shifted it to there, and that's instantly put another keyframe in. So we can see here we've got 2 keyframes that actually start. Now we've also got these arrow keys that allows us to move back and forth between the 2 keyframes, and you can see that it's moving the white box at the same time. So what we'll do is with this keyframe, we're just going to move that in a little bit, because that is an option that you can actually do. You can click on these keyframes and you can drag them out and drag them in. Dragging them away from each other obviously extends the amount of time that your keyframe needs in order to perform its action. So for instance, if you initially had a 2-second item that wanted to move from state A to state B in 2 seconds, if you extend the furthest right one out, then that will allow it to take longer. So it may take 3 seconds in order to do that whole graphical move, whatever that is that your keyframe is set to do, whether that's a transition, a movement, a scale, an opacity. It either shortens or lengthens that particular action. So what we've got now, if we just play it, we've got an action which allows our item to move from one to another. And you can see as we cross those 2 keyframes, that's what happens. So it's not particularly very smooth at the moment, and it's not particularly the greatest item to move either. It's not really doing anything that's particularly special, but we want it to move in a little bit more of a smoother fashion. So what we'll do is we'll go to the first keyframe. So we'll click on the first keyframe, and then we'll right click, and then we can go to temporal interpolation, and that gives us every single little option that we can do to change that keyframe into a different type of keyframe. So you've got a few different options. You've got linear, which is basically what we are now. That is effectively moving in a line from one to another. So it goes from this point to this point in a straight line. Then you've got Bezier, which effectively allows it to curve. So that's got those little handles on. It's the same sort of thing that you get in Photoshop, where you've got a tiny little point and then you've got two handles either side, and you can make it a curve, or you can make it an S shape, or however you want to make that shape change. That's what that is. Then you've got Auto Bezier, which is basically the same as Bezier, but automatically gives you a standard curve. And then you've got Continue Bezier and Hold. Now a hold frame is basically, it will not move from one state to the other, it will just jump across effectively. And then you've got ease in and ease out. So Auto Bezier, Continuous Bezier and Hold are pretty much variations of the same sort of thing from linear and Bezier. So what we can do is we can ease our item out when we start off. So if we add ease out on our item, you can see it's changed to what looks like a little sort of egg timer type sort of affair. And that tells us that it's now going to ease out, because it's going to ease out from the state it's in, which is A, into the state it wants to be in, which is B. So we can also do the same thing by holding that down, by selecting the last keyframe and then going to temporal temporal interpolation, and we go to ease in. And that eases it in to the state we want it to be. So it's going to ease out of not moving into moving, and then ease in from moving to not moving. So it sort of gives it that arc. And you can see that if you drop down on this little arrow here, you can see how it's done it. So you can see it's moved from not moving, and it's ramped up to moving at the fastest speed it can, and then it's ramped down to not moving again, which gives us, what we're going to do is we're going to show you how that actually works, and you'll see it working on this white square here. So it moves in faster and then moves out to slower. And you can make this slightly faster or slower. You can bring this in. So if we bring this in, you can see it brings it up. So that will make it much faster, obviously, and over a shorter period of time. So you can see it's smoother. As it smooths in at this end, let's just move back again. You can see it sort of slows it down from that speed. Now there are other things you can actually do with this. You can ramp this up, which basically gives it a really fast ramp up and then a drop. So we can grab this handle here and we can just move this forward like so, and that gives us a ramp. So we've got a little bit of a ramp, so it will take a long time to ramp up to that speed. So it'll zoom up and then zoom down. So let's have a look and see how that actually works. So you'll see this in the white square. You'll see it move, takes a long time, and then moves into there. So that is basically how you go about doing that, and you can do this in an infinite number of ways. So if I select this keyframe, for instance, and then I grab this handle, what I can do is I can move that so that it's going the other way. I can shift it about, I can make it smaller, I can make it zoom in and zoom out as I choose. I can do the ramp in the middle if I want, so I can make that a ramp in the center, and it basically, what that will do, it will zoom to the fast and then it will drop back out again. So we'll see that happening here now. As you can see, very fast, very slow. And effectively, that is what a keyframe does. There are other things you can make keyframes do as well, so we can make it do other things at the same time. So let's just go back to the first keyframe. So we'll go back to this first keyframe, and then what we'll do is we'll go to rotation and we'll add a keyframe here, and then we'll move to the center. So we'll get to here and we'll add another keyframe. So I can click on there to add a keyframe, and then what we'll do is we'll move to the back keyframe and add another one. And here what we can do is we can say no, we don't want that to be anything at all, and then here what we can do is we can say I want that to have rotated 360, well, I want it to have rotated in some way, shape or form. Let's just make sure that that is rotating in the right place. So let's get that to come off screen like that. So we've got a hold frame here, which basically allows us to tell it we want it to stay flat for that first half of the entire animation. It doesn't want to move, it doesn't want to do anything. It's not until it gets to this animation, this keyframe, that it starts to shift, as we can see. And it starts to shift off screen and flatten itself out. And at that point there, what we can do is we can tell these two to ease in and ease out. So we right click on these two and we go to ease out, and we right click on that one and we go to ease in, and we don't need to actually change anything on those. We just want them to ease in and ease out, so it will do what it's supposed to do, and it's gone effectively. And then what we do is we shorten our item till we get to where the keyframes are and they end, and then that has basically gone off screen and it stays off screen. If we wanted to add in some opacity, what we can do is we can click on this, just go to this keyframe here. So we're in this position keyframe and we're saying yes, that's fine. What we want to do then is we want to go to the next keyframe, which is this one. So let's go to this next keyframe. Let's go to here. So what we want to say is from this point on here, we want to add another keyframe of opacity. So let's bring opacity down. Let's click a keyframe in there, and then let's move to the next keyframe, which is the end. Let's add another keyframe in there. So we'll do that, and then at that point we'll drop that down to 0, and that, as you can see, it starts to go transparent as it leaves. And we can make that larger or smaller dependent on what we want it to do. So for argument's sake, let's move the opacity so that it's virtually gone by the time we get to there. So effectively what we've done is we've got it to move across, we've got it to swoosh off to one side, and then we've also got, as it swooshes off, we've got it to go transparent so it looks like it's disappearing. And that can be for anything, it can be for size, it can be for position, it can be anything at all you want it to be. It doesn't necessarily have to be just opacity. It's pretty simple. As you can see, it just starts disappearing. So as you can see, keyframes make such a big difference. You can do so many things with them, and they are integral to editing. If you want to make something move from one state to another, and that is effectively, as I've said before, what a keyframe does. It allows you to move from state A to state B to state C to state D, etc., etc., and allows it to your graphic or your item or your edit to move from one place to another and take the viewer along with it in a seamless and smooth way if you wanted to. Hope it was useful, hope you enjoyed it, hope you can put it to some use. I'm sure you can, because with editing we use keyframes all the time. If you did, please do like and subscribe below, do all that good stuff. Leave a comment below if you want to, which is great because we always like to respond to those, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.